This is the Moonman M800. It's a full-size fountain pen that's primarily made out of turned acrylic. It's available in a variety of colors, and today I have it in a beautiful blue resin that has swirls of black and silver throughout. There's a really nice amount of depth to this resin, as well as moments of chatoyancy as you turn the pen in your hand. Overall, the design is pretty reminiscent of the Leonardo Momento Zero. That one retails for about $160 US, whereas this pen I picked up for about $20 US. The top finial has a conical point, and then it's separated from the cap with a single metal band, which includes a bent metal clip, which is springy and functional, and it also has a really nice roller attachment at the bottom, which makes it very easy to go over thick fabrics and pen loops. The cap has a subtle taper thickening down to the bottom where we see two metal bands and no markings. The cap comes off in 1 and about 1/4 of a turn to reveal a number 6 size stainless steel nib. At the time of recording, it's only available in fine, and you can pick it up in either a Bach branded nib or the Moonman nib, which is what I have here today. And on the back, we can see a black plastic feed with pretty low profile fins. The grip section has a pretty unique shape. It starts with a flare out, and then it has a bulbous shape to a metal band. There's then threads, which are smooth to the touch, followed by a straight portion, and then a step up to the barrel, which starts with another metal band. The barrel is straight to about this location, and then it tapers down to another metal band, followed by the end finial, which has a conical point, and that adds a bit of symmetry to the conical point that we saw on the cap. In the hand, the pen is very lightweight. It is well balanced with the center of gravity inside the crook of my hand. For me, I really like that. It makes it a very comfortable pen to use for short notes, but it's also long enough to use for long writing sessions. The grip section, as I mentioned, is very unique. It is long and easy to grasp in many different locations, which is great because it also has varying thicknesses, so you can really customize how this pen feels in your hand. And the cap does post deeply and securely. For me, with medium-sized hands, it transfers the center of gravity just about to the crook of my hand. But personally, I find that the pen is a bit long in this form, so I tend to not write with it posted. But if you have large hands, I think you'll find that perfectly comfortable. In terms of size comparisons, here's the M800, a typical Pilot G2 rollerball pen, and your standard Sharpie. Before we disassemble the M800, I wanted to take a moment to compare it with a few other fountain pens. First up, I have the TWSBI Eco, and today I have this one in indigo and bronze. While design-wise it doesn't have very much in common with the M800, I did want to bring this one in because it is a staple in many fountain pen collections. Next up, I have the Asvine P20, which is another Chinese-made fountain pen that takes many design inspirations from pens made in Italy. It features similar conical points at the finials, as well as a similar roller attachment at the bottom of the clip. Unlike the M800, this one is a piston filler, whereas the M800 is a cartridge converter fountain pen. And then I have one more fountain pen from China. This is the Pen BBS 487. It's a pretty unique model that uses a magnet-activated piston. I haven't reviewed this one on the channel yet. Let me know in the comments if it is one that you'd like to see featured. And I wanted to bring this one in because it uses a resin that is called Galaxy, and I feel like it has a lot of similarities with the resin that we see on the M800. And to round things off, I did want to bring at least one fountain pen in from Italy, and this one is the Visconti Mirage Mythos. I have this one in a resin that's called Apollo, which is a beautiful brown resin that reminds me a lot of walnut wood. Of the pens on the table, they all have bent metal clips with the exception of the Visconti, and that one has a spring-loaded clip. Let's take a look at these pens with their caps removed. All caps unscrew with the exception of the Visconti. This one has a cap that pulls off and it's secured with a magnet. Let's take a closer look at these sections and nibs. All nibs are fully exposed and made of stainless steel. Also, all nibs are made in-house, though as I mentioned, you can purchase the Moonman with a Bach-made nib. In terms of grip sections, the TWSBI starts with a flare-out followed by a taper to threads. The Asvine and the M800 both have fairly unique grip sections that start with a flare out followed by a bulbous transition to threads, though I would say that the M800 is a little bit more defined in its grip section. The Pen BBS has an hourglass shaped grip section, and the Visconti has a flare out that features alternating V patterns, followed by a slight taper, and then a pretty dramatic step up to the barrel. Let's take a look at these pens with their caps posted. All caps post securely, though most do not post very deeply. I would say the Visconti is the deepest posting cap of the bunch, and it's also the only one that secures in place with a magnet. Okay, disassembling the M800. No tools are required, but you might find grippy materials are useful to have. The cap unscrews, and if we take a look inside, we'll see there is no plastic cap liner, but there is a step up just about halfway through that barrel, and that acts as a seal against the grip section on the pen, which is a great design. That's a good use of the acrylic body on this cap. In terms of regular cleaning and maintenance, there's no real need to disassemble it. I just run this under warm water, or maybe soak it with a little bit of mild detergent if I have some stubborn ink stains. In terms of the pen body, you can unscrew it from the grip section, and that's it for the barrel. And there we can see the only branding on this pen. It says Majohn at the bottom of this grip section. If you want, you can pull the converter straight out of that grip section. And then this converter can also be disassembled. There's a sleeve that unscrews from the back. It can be pulled out. And then you can remove the entire piston unit. If you want to disassemble this piston unit, you just simply unscrew the piston knob, grease up these rods if you want for smooth operation. And it's also useful to add some silicone grease to the head of this piston to ensure that you get a good seal. But I'm going to leave this in place for now. Also, another thing to note, there is a little metal agitator inside this chamber that helps break up surface tension to allow ink to flow freely throughout this pen. If you want, you can remove it, but I don't really have an issue with having this in, so I'm going to leave it in place for now. And then we have our nib and feed in this grip section. If we want to remove them, simply give it a turn. I like to use my grippy materials to give me some extra grip. And there we can see that they are held in place in this nib collar, which actually came a little bit damaged. There's a little crack in it right there, which you can see makes it kind of deformed. I'm happy to say that this hasn't affected the performance of this pen, and I don't know if this is a regular defect that you'll see on many M800s, but it is at least what I saw in my unit. If you want to pull the nib and feed out of the nib collar, just simply grab them with the grippy materials and give it a straight pull. And then they simply come apart. At this point, the pen is fully disassembled. In order to reassemble, I'm going to start with our converter. We're going to put the piston unit through the back. There is a little trim piece that you need to line up to make sure that it's seated against the plastic chamber. And then we're going to secure that in place with the sleeve. Just like that, we have a fully functional converter. Next, let's grab our feed and our nib collar. The feed is keyed, so it only goes into the nib collar in one orientation. And then we're going to grab our nib and line it up to the feed, push it in as far as you can. What you're looking for with lining up the nib and feed is that the shoulders of the nib are symmetrical with the shoulders of the feed. And that looks pretty good. We'll then screw that into our grip section. Reattach our converter. Put that assembly into our barrel. And lastly, our cap. And just like that, we're ready to ink up. Okay, inking up the M800. Today I selected a diamine ink. This is Majestic Blue, which is one of my favorite blue inks. It's kind of a blue-black with a really nice amount of red sheen. We'll take the cap off the bottle of ink and the pen. remove the barrel. Make sure the piston in the converter is extended all the way down. Put the nib in the ink and screw up the piston. In order to get a full fill, I'm going to expel the ink and then draw it up one more time. I might do it one more time for good measure. That's a pretty decent fill. I do see a bit of an air gap back there, and that's most likely because I can't extend the piston all the way down due to the metal agitator. But that's going to be plenty of ink, so we'll go ahead and wipe off the nib. I'm going to cap up the bottle of ink so we don't have a spill. Put the barrel back on the pen. As well as the cap. And just like that, we're ready to write. Okay, writing with the Moonman M800. Cap unscrews. And today we're writing with a stainless steel fine nib, which is branded Moonman. And it's a beautifully tuned nib. It's very wet and very smooth with just a hint of feedback, but unfortunately that's not how this pen came out of the box. When I first got this pen, I found the tines on the nib were overly tight, so I took some brass shims to spread them out, and when I did, I found that the nib was then fairly scratchy, so I took some 12,000 grit micro mesh and polished the tipping material on this pen. Now that I did, it does write beautifully, but of course that was a journey to get there. And I will show an overlay here so you can see what the pen was like when it was first out of the box versus after I did some tuning. In terms of our ink, today we have one by Diamine. And it's called Majestic Blue. For flex, I'm going to turn the page. If you go slow, you can push out a really little bit of line variation, but overall, it's a pretty stiff steel nib. In terms of reverse writing, actually quite smooth, a little bit more feedback than the front ways up. And the feed's mostly keeping up. It did get a little bit dry as I crossed that T, but I would say, at least for this particular pen, which again I did tune, you could consider reverse writing for a little bit of a thinner line, although it might not be the most reliable experience in the world. So what do I think of the Moonman M800? I really like the design of this pen. I think it looks classic and timeless, and yet not boring. And I also am really impressed with this resin. I love the swirls of chatoyancy, the silver and black mixed in with that blue. It really adds a lot of depth and makes it a very interesting pen to turn in your hand. I also think that the overall design is very functional. I really like this clip. Not only is it springy, but it has this really nice roller attachment at the bottom, so it's very easy to slide over thick fabrics, notebooks, or even pen loops. And the design of the pen is very ergonomic in your hand. I really like the grip section. If you want to bear down, you get a pretty small grip at the very bottom. And if you want to have a bit more of a relaxed grip, it widens out towards the back. And the nib performs greatly. It's wet and smooth, but also at the same time, it did require a bit of tuning to get there. And I guess that's maybe the first point of areas where this pen could be improved. I suspect if you buy the Bach variant instead of the Moonman, it might be a little bit more well-tuned, but that's just a guess. I haven't personally used it. Another area for improvement with this nib is the fact that it's only available in fine. And I think that that's a miss. It would be nice if they had this pen in an extra fine, a medium, or maybe even a broad. Also, when I first got this pen and I picked it up, it felt overly light, almost to the extent that it feels cheap in the hand. And that surprised me. Yes, this pen is very inexpensive, but when you compare it with the Leonardo Momento Zero that it's based off of, that pen also comes in with a very similar weight. Although the Leonardo probably does feel a little bit more substantial in the hand because it has better build quality, I did show that this one has that little bit of damage on the nib collar during the disassembly portion of this video, but also the cap does not do a great job sealing off this pen. And I'll put some B-roll footage of this pen being capped so you can see the step in the barrel actually does not quite line up with the grip section. There is a little bit of a gap, and what I found over time is that the nib and feed do stay wet, which is a testament to their design, but with very minimal use, I find that the ink in the converter completely runs dry after just about 2 months, and that's a pretty short amount of time compared to the rest of the pens in my collection. One other point, and this is just a nitpick, I don't personally eyedropper my pens very often, but I think it would be nice to be able to with this model. And in order to do that, they would have needed to change out the threads on this grip section to be made out of plastic. So that's another area where this pen could be improved. And lastly is the elephant in the room, which is the similarities between this pen and the Leonardo Momento Zero. I wouldn't say that this is a full-on counterfeit because it doesn't brand itself as Leonardo, but when you look at them side by side, they are extremely similar. And I do think that's where this pen has a lot of its value because it does give you a sense for what it's like to own and use a Leonardo Momento Zero at a very significant discount. And furthermore, now I haven't personally tried this, but I have seen it in other videos. You can apparently swap in a JoWo nib inside this Moonman nib unit. So if you wanted to, you could technically go out and purchase a spare Leonardo Momento Zero nib, which happens to also be made by JoWo, swap it into this pen, and have nearly an identical writing experience to the real thing. And that just leaves me to say, thank you for watching.